another episode of the Reimagining Work podcast with your host, Rogi Noord, and in this particular case, the expert, John Wenger.
Hello.
Hello. Say hi, John.
Hi, John.
Title of this episode 7, it is Reimagining Working Together. So, in the current situation that we're at, we work in a very siloed and hierarchical business. It's usually us against the world or I against the world. It's me. How do I stand out? How do I perform? I need to get the list now. How do I make myself look good? How can I get people to notice me? And this is from one of your blog posts, just in a regular meeting. And I like how you wrote it up. And you're more worried about what everybody else is thinking of you, or how you can establish yourself even within a normal meeting, than actually trying to have a good outcome of the meeting, or be productive, or be supportive, or this, I guess, is something that has been going on for a long time, and it doesn't get any better in the current climate, but it is something that we would like to see changed.
Yeah, certainly. I mean, I know that people want to be in workplaces where they feel that they're part of something, they're contributing something, and that they are in a place where there's more collaboration and co-working and sharing and cooperation and all that. And it's hard. And you said earlier on, it's about a sense of me against the world or us against the world. And you've talked about silos. This is a very large conversation. Just a little kind of part of it, I think, is around the architecture, because you mentioned hierarchies. So certainly the architecture of our enterprises will influence us. I think it was Churchill who said we design our architecture, and our architecture then designs us. So we've built structures around us, or we've inherited structures in the workplace, which cause us, I think, in some part, to behave in certain competitive ways with each other. It's a discourse which some might say is a bit nutty, that, of course we're not competitive. We've got values around co-working and teamwork. And I think teamwork, all one word, is not it. It's not the response. It's sometimes it's just a set of values which don't get lived. Because
it's a checkbox that we can we've teamworked. Ka-ching. Yeah, that's one on the list. Yeah, one more.
So there is a question around the architecture and redesigning hierarchical structures into something which is more humane. The conversation that I'm probably more interested in, purely because it feels like it's an area that I actually work in, is not so much the enterprise architecture side of things, though it's certainly conversations I have. It's more around how people interrelate and working with groups of people to assist them to relate to each other differently. When I'm in a room with a bunch of people, I'm interested in creating communities and breaking some of those silos down.
But if I may, so what you do and where you want to start a change like this is you work with a group of people in order to get that changed, instead of saying, well, this is a business, this is your hierarchy, we need to change this hierarchy, and we need to change this, and you change everything in the organization except people. And you do it exactly the other way around. You focus on people, and then whatever change happens.
Well, that's what I mean. I think there's a conversation that happens in conjunction with, in tandem with the working with people in the room, changing mindsets. The other conversation is around the architecture of the enterprise, which also needs to happen in tandem with. But I think there's a bit that I'm focused on, which is around the change of mindsets. And I don't go along with the idea that I can go into a room and conduct a so-called training session and change people. None of that in that sentence sits comfortably with me. But I do believe that if you are in the business of change and assisting people to change, and being alongside them as they change, that there needs to be some kind of change, really. Otherwise, everyone's wasting their time and their money and their energy. And I think it's really important that people's mindset shifts around how do we become we? How do we become a we instead of a me and you?
So is it more about the awareness, creating a certain awareness for people?
I think it's part of it. I think it's many factors involved, but part of it is around the awareness and the consciousness of what does we look like, And I think probably most of us have an experience of being in a team or a group or a working party or something in our life, whether that's work or hobbies or something, where you kind of go, oh, that was a really fun group to be a part of, and we got some stuff done. It's like a peak moment of belonging in our lives. I think we've all got a story like that to tell. And there's one that I use frequently, which is of a team that I was a member of for about 5 years when I was living in New Zealand. And it was probably the most satisfying, thrilling, intense, emotional, and effective team that I've ever been a part of. And one of the things that made it such a good thing to be a part of was that we were really effective at what we did. And I think our effectiveness was directly connected to the closeness of our relationships. And by closeness, I don't mean it was a big love-in, because we had some really strong and robust conversations with each other about the work. And we talked endlessly about the performance of our work as a collective and how we could assist each other as individuals to remain a part of the collective and to keep working on improving our performance. So I think the relationships were core to that being a really effective team. And I stand by this. I use a technique called sociometry, which is a body of knowledge which says that the quality of an outcome is directly related to the quality of relationships between the people who are trying to generate that outcome. And I know that now from enough experience of seeing it and feeling it myself. So yes, I do think there's a kind of awareness shift that needs to happen. And I think with the awareness and the consciousness shift, there also will be some behavioral shifts. So there's some simple sort of behaviors that I can adjust if I wanted to relate to you in a different way. But it's not just a behavioral thing. That's where you get in the realm of training, which I kind of liken to dog training. It's not a Pavlovian, if I just say this to you, things will be great between us. But it's a mind shift thing. So the questions that you started out with, which I've listed in one of my articles, are things which I think are all quite natural. How do I make myself look good? How do I get people to notice me? How can I garner praise? How can I get people to like me? How can I prove that I'm valuable? All natural things.
Isn't it a bit, because I'm just thinking about in what you say, the natural way of things, like more primal. I mean, surely in a very, very long time ago, before the Stone Age, that time, there certainly was an inherent need for an individual to stand out in order to be the one to procreate, or stronger, or taller, or something. And
however, I'll interrupt you. However, there is something which I believe is hardwired within us from the minute that we're born, which leads us to want to be attractive and attracted to our primary caregiver. I did a lot of work in the area of attachment many years ago. There is something I think we come out of the womb with, which is to attach ourselves to a primary caregiver, mother usually, and there are certain things I think we do which assist the mother to bond with us so that we are able to attach to the mother. So those are all natural things that I think are innate. And they come through in varying degrees depending on our upbringing. But it's not, in the early days, certainly not about who's going to be the one that procreates or keeps the tribe, the line of the tribe going on. But so that's what I say, these are all natural things. How do I get people to like me? How do I get people to draw themselves to me? How can I be valuable and liked by people near me? I think this bit's natural. That bit's absolutely natural. And for folks that say that they don't have any of that in them, I think they're lying.
Everybody does it. Because you do it subconsciously.
Absolutely.
Subconsciously.
Absolutely. The interesting bit for me, though, is that bit is not good enough in the workplace. Because when we come together in organizations and businesses and teams, we want to try and achieve something together. So it's a purposeful coming together. So the human stuff is great, but I think that's one level of consciousness that we can have, or one level of being. Say we're in a team meeting. The one level of my being, my expression, my interactions will be around that. How can I get people to look at me well, and how can I induce some praise or admiration or acknowledgement? How can I get people to see that I'm valuable and likable? On one level, we will do that. That's not good enough. I think there's another level of consciousness of behavior that we can move to, which is what most people would probably be doing in a team meeting, which is that kind of professional hat. There's an operational hat. So you are a member of this group or this team because of your training and your experience and your expertise. You've been hired to do a particular job, and that's the thing that you want to bring to your workplace meetings. So that's the professional person the role that you enact in gatherings and meetings. So in those sorts of situations, when you're wearing your operational hat, you want to say, these are my technical abilities. If I'm the financial guy, I'll speak about anything that's on the agenda or matters related to financial issues. If I'm the marketing person, I'll speak about things from a marketing perspective, and I'm going to bring my marketing eye to any conversation that I might get involved in. And you know, people are familiar with this. So somebody will pipe up and go, from a marketing perspective, I'm not sure that that's a good decision that we go ahead with that. Yeah, and the financial person will go, well, from a financial perspective, I think da 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 da. And from the branding guy will go, well, from a branding perspective, I think what we need to do is here. So decisions about what course an organization might take are there. I think is the competitive thing that you mentioned earlier, where you get the branding or the financial, or the marketing, or the whoever trying to display the biggest bunch of feathers that they can, like a big peacock. Which one's going to win out here? And sometimes it's force of personality, or it's force of argument, or ability to put words together in an articulate way that might swing people one way or the other. And I think the future of us working together, when I think about reimagining co-working, the future of humans working together is not, say, here's a problem before us. How about you come up with an idea and a plan? I'll come up with an idea and a plan. She'll come up with an idea and a plan. We all come together and meet together at the table with ideas and plans, and then we vote on the best one. I think that is not the way to go.
No, we create an idea and a plan
and
together.
we create more competition. What we do is we end up maybe voting on something that gets compromised and watered down, and we end up with something which doesn't really draw on our shared wisdom and expertise. So my thinking is that there's another level of consciousness, that this is the bit I think humans were just kind of in a phase of learning how to do better together, of how to be in a we. Well, I take off my me hat for a bit. So it doesn't matter so much that you like me or you dislike me. I take off my operational hat, so it doesn't matter quite so much that I'm the financial guy. Quite so much. But we come together and face this shared problem with a blank slate, if you like. I mean, it's not a blank slate. We've obviously got all of our experience and our wisdom and expertise, but we sit and look at this problem collectively, together, collectively. And it's a little bit like the improv yes game. Are you familiar with the yes game?
No,
So it's like improv training.
Yeah.
You get, so I might walk in the room and say, "Oh, Roger, what's happened to your foot?" Now, what I've just done is I've made you an offer.
Yeah.
Now, you in response could say what?
Well, nothing. But that's negative. But it has to be positive.
That's rejecting my offer. So
exactly.
Makes and it's really
I'm just making that point there.
That illustrates the point beautifully. Or I could say, Roger, what's happened to your foot?
So
and you say,
I had an elephant stand on it. So
exactly. Now it doesn't matter if you say elephant or the dog bit it or I dropped a glass. It doesn't matter actually what you say, but in essence, you're accepting my offer, and we keep going back and forth. Making and accepting offers from each other, and what we're doing is building on, rather than fighting against.
There's no really like the yes, but
that's right.
That's something that you actually don't want in any productive meeting. It's like
that's right,
because anything before the but is completely meaningless.
It's a lie. Yeah. I completely agree. And then I put forward an idea, and you go, yeah, but. Well, you're already in competition with me.
Yeah, it's very difficult not to do that.
It is very difficult not to do that.
It's very hard not to, because it's at one end, it's just a statement that you make. It's just a force of habit to say that. Yeah, I agree, but. So, yeah, I do agree, but and it's so difficult not to even say it. Even if you want to be constructive, you're still tend to say those exact words.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but
yeah.
I'm kind of interested in some of the experiences that you may have had. When I have these conversations with people, I get really curious. And so what's it like for you? And mostly, what I find is that people, very quietly, we don't acknowledge this openly, is that we find those experiences on a human level kind of painful and isolating. And that touches me deeply. I get incredibly moved when I hear people say how isolated or lonely or lonesome or detached they feel from their workplaces or their teams.
Yeah.
It's not what I'd see with my eyes if I walked in, but on a heart level, and I don't apologize for talking about being on the heart level, for looking about reimagining work. On the heart level, it sucks, really, because we aren't going to get to solve some of the things that are facing us as human beings unless we start to work a little bit better together. Like you say, if you get that kind of thing that we've just illustrated with the yes game, it's pretty rare, I think. Mostly you get people being competitive and doing the yes but thing. That's what I see. Yeah.
Yeah, true. No, it's true. I mean, but it is a competition, right? I mean, especially in these days where people are being laid off like there's no tomorrow in some cases, and it is. I mean, it's very difficult to create even. I am important. I need to fight for my position in this company. I cannot afford to lose my job. I cannot afford to lose my position. And I will do anything to retain that. And that's a little bit the emotion that's been created in our modern culture. And we know, and our peers know, that if you change that attitude into a or collaboration, a collaborative environment, that a business can benefit from that. And
it's reflexive, don't you think? That if the business benefits, then I benefit. Because all those statements you made are absolutely true. I was sitting, listening, and nodding my head, thinking, "Yeah, I need to maintain my position. I need to make sure I still have a job. I need to still make sure that I'm contributing." That's all true.
Yeah.
I think the shift, the mindset shift, the shift in consciousness is how do we go about that? And I don't think it comes from a competitive, siloed sort of way of doing it.
Exactly. Exactly, but nobody knows this, right? I mean, in general, the general. I'm looking for a particular word, but that doesn't matter. But the general idea is that you keep things to yourself, and you make sure that your little island is that you are unreplaceable. And
I think it's an interesting like how do you build on that we-ness? I've sometimes suggested to people that what they might do is to get an illustration of how different it feels, because everyone would say that they're a team player. Everyone would say that they're sort of joining in.
It's on every application, every vacancy, every job vacancy. You have to be able to work independently, but you have to be a team player. Yeah, sure. Of course, I'm a team player. Yeah.
Yeah, well, and it also means different things. I think sometimes it means, are you able to do the groupthink thing and, not cause too many waves? That's all about systems wanting to maintain themselves. So I've asked people sometimes to think about how they do that, or how they could do that. And it's like, how sometimes I've talked earlier about meetings. So if I'm the financial guy, I'll pipe up about anything that's to do with financial matters. But if there's nothing that pertains to financial matters, I'll sit back, I'll say nothing. I'll maybe play with my phone a bit, or send text to people, or scribble notes, as if there's bits of it that don't pertain to me. And this is the kind of thought experiment that I've asked people to consider. Imagine if everything on the agenda pertained to you. Just imagine if. And then you kind of go through the agenda, or you listen to every part of the conversation. Just imagine that everything had something to do with you. When you kind of get yourself in that space, something happens to your mindset, to your consciousness, because conversations that you might not normally have been party to or joined in before, and you find yourself joining in because you're imagining, this might have something to do with me. You suddenly get that whole thing about systems. Everything is connected to everything else, because it is. Everything is connected to everything else. We sometimes don't feel it because we haven't much experience of it, but also we need to give ourselves the bigger vision to just imagine that it might be the case. And my goodness, what happens to us when we start to participate in conversations that we didn't used to, because we've actually found how we're connected in. We are plugged into everything. And some of the conversations become really enlivening, because so you get the really interesting ideas from the financial guy who might not have contributed before, or from the branding guy who might not have contributed before, or from the operational team who are answering phones, contributing to things that they didn't think had anything to do with them in the past, but they're pretending as if it did. Fascinating to kind of play that little experiment.
Yeah. I can see that. I can see how that would happen, and how that would open people's eyes and make them think beyond their own little. I don't want to belittle it,
or large,
or large, or whatever. But their own personal world. I mean, in most companies that I've worked, you really do have the feeling that there's me, and then there's the department that I work for. So, but that's a department. It has a name in this communication, whatever. And then there's me, and then there's 4 or 5 other individuals within that department, and then there is the rest of the company.
Yeah,
and they all do something, and you got legal, and you got HR, and okay, fine. I don't want to know anything about them, but it already goes wrong that within your own, the people sitting next to you are not a team member, or it's not us, that's another individual that happens to be working on the same in the same department, let alone having any interest at all in another department. And the department heads, they come together, they talk to each other, but I don't know what's being said. I don't know what's being done.
Well, this is, I think, the connection with the looking at a business as a system, as a whole. Like we stop thinking about it as departments in my department, and for certain reasons, there may be, you'd want to be sitting in a particular part of a building, or liaising mostly with certain kinds of people. But that we consciousness is about what's good for the whole, what's good for the business. So conversations move beyond the first level of how can I make myself look good, how can I be liked. It moves beyond the second level of how can I demonstrate my particular area of expertise and push for my silo to win. It moves to the third level, which is how can what comes out of my mouth be of benefit to the whole. And so there have been occasions where encourage people when we've kind of got to this bit of saying, now just be really aware that from now on, before you let the words tumble out of your mouth, is this about me consciousness or me doing my work well consciousness, or is this about what's going to move on the we? How is this going to develop and grow the we? And this, the subtle changes that go on in the conversations, you kind of feel the kind of competitive edge between people just leave the room. There's none of that sort of competitive tension, and people who normally would be there's a couple of folks that come to mind who would be at each other's throats, becoming best buddies because they realize, my God, you've got a really creative head on you. This has been really useful to have this conversation because you've come up with some of the most stimulating comments that have helped me in my work. And it gets to that point where people realize it's not about teamwork, it's about cooperation. There's no, I'll do this for you if you do this for me. That just goes out the window. It's, I'm doing this because it's going to help all of us. And if it helps all of us, it helps me. Interestingly, sometimes that requires what some people, I suppose, might call a sacrifice, or for their silo, what they previously thought of their silo. I had a friend years ago who was a builder, and I don't know if other builders or architects would agree with this, but I just found this anecdote interesting, that in designing a house, you don't try and maximize every single room. You're not going to have a whole room full of amazing house full of amazing rooms. That in order to get a satisfying whole house, that sometimes the architect and the builder will sacrifice one room. So it might be just a tiny bit smaller than you'd like. But because of that, it means that the whole house is at its optimal. So it's making the best that you can for the whole of the house, rather than a collection of nice rooms, which might turn out to be a really unsatisfying house. Do you see what I mean?
Yeah, sometimes it's not necessary for somebody to just, take a step back and let others just solve the problem or come up with a approach or an approach or something, and instead of as an individual saying, well, I need to have my my 2 cents in there, I need to say something because for the sake of saying something, because it's me, so I need I tend to talk a lot, and but it's I see how you sometimes just you need to take a step back in order to let others come to a certain conclusion or whatever, let them shine without you being there to interrupt it or.
That's right, and you also uncover the things that you might not have previously if you kind of maintain this sort of siloed structure of how you relate to each other. Let people bring all of their creativity, all of their humanity, all of their ideas, even if it's not their department, if you like.
No, exactly, but it does mean that especially for individuals who tend to be on the forefront all the time, and because you're not going to change the individuals that are in the room. I mean, you're still going to have the same people there. It's just, and in any meeting, one is always a little bit more present, if you will, than others are. There are meetings where some persons, they only speak when spoken to, and then they will only answer a question if it directly refers to what it is that they're doing, and they will only give the information that is actually asked for and nothing else. And it's exactly those kind of people you want to have open up and take part in the conversation, and that can only happen if the one who's always talking shuts up for a minute. And let somebody else just go with it, if you will.
And I think when you get that, it's a sort of self-perpetuating cycle as well. When people begin to have that experience of we came up with something that we couldn't have done as our own individually, and then voting on it. we did that actually all together. It becomes quite compelling over time for people to want to become more interested and join in areas they may not have felt were relevant to them, or because I've heard exactly what you've just described. I don't join in that because it's got nothing to do with me. And once they realize that when they've made a comment, how valuable it is for everybody else and how it improves things for the whole, they start to go, oh, maybe what I have to contribute is valuable, even though it may not look directly relevant to me. But then you also get people going, I'd quite like to hear from Janice because she always says something really clever at this point.
Yeah, exactly.
You get people drawing each other in as well.
Yeah.
And I've seen that happen too. They can begin, again, I think that's part of that self-organizing thing of humans. When they begin to manage themselves and their relationships, I think then that it snowballs into greater sort of teamness, and sort of we consciousness grows from there. But you kind of have to start. You have to sort of do it. And the sad thing about doing this, getting to we consciousness, is that there isn't a step 1, step 2, step 3. There is a step 1.
Yeah, and then it's just a lot of work.
And it's step 1, but then you kind of have to keep, and then you build on. It's a bit like the yes game. There's no script to how you and I could develop that little scenario. What's wrong with your foot?
Yeah.
But what happens is you get a really enjoyable and satisfying whole scenario when we make the first offer, and we just keep accepting offers from each other and building on rather than yes butting.
Also, we're hitting 30 minutes.
We are too.
We are indeed. I'm thinking really hard if I've got another question for you, because I do find the topic very interesting.
Well, this is absolute central to my work, and I could talk about this for a very long time. I think that bit around a we consciousness is constantly something that gives me pause for thought. I'm in the middle of a piece of work with some folks who are, from my eyes, incredibly excited at the idea that what they're building together in this kind of community of shared practice is a we-ness that they have never had before. And they, as individuals, as humans, and as professionals, they seem to find it incredibly exciting, really thrilling, of the opportunities to learn from each other, because they have begun to develop this we-ness amongst them, rather than that's your center over there and this is my center over here. And they are now looking for other platforms on which to exercise this relationship. So, what other kind of digital platforms might they be for them to use? So it's really exciting stuff to see that shift happen in the room. And I think there's lots of other areas around teamness that we could certainly have other podcasts about. I'd be very happy to do that.
Yeah. Well, we certainly will. I think a few that spring to mind is basically where do you even begin with approaching people to see if you can create that first spark, right? I mean, because
here's the thing. So people want better co-working in the workplace. Managers want teams to have better co-working in the workplace. That's a start. What's the thing you want to create? So it's not doing it for the sake of having a lovely team or having a nice feeling between each other. It's purposeful. So the purpose is, this is what we're here to do in our business, in our organization. We know that we're going to maximize that when we have people working collaboratively and cooperatively to achieve that, rather than individually. So you have the purpose. This is what we're here to do together. So let's see if we can put some of our energy and our investment on the together bit, because as I said earlier, I think humans are pretty messy and hit and miss about doing this. And we have those experiences where we can say this was a peak co-working memory for me, but sometimes it feels a bit accidental. And I think largely human endeavor, it has turned out kind of accidental. There's enough, I think we know. I mean, the thing I apply is sociometry, which is around studying relationships and interrelationships between people, and getting people to do that. So sociometry is a highly democratic way of doing it. It's getting people to look at themselves and their teamness. They look at their own team. So when people become aware of what they've been doing and how they get on with each other, then that they are then able to make some decisions about how they can improve that sense of we and team. So it starts, I think, with what's your purpose and how does and do we need to do this together? You don't just build a team for the sake of building a team.
No, exactly. And is that something that because people are listening, we hope anyway, but people are listening and I can imagine that the people who are listening go like, well, that's all very well, but it sounds very extensive, very fundamental. And obviously the best thing to do when you want to have such a fundamental change is get help. Because there's always a chance that you do more harm than good. But is there anything that you would advise, anything the listener can take away right now that can make that's something to think about, like what you said as for the last?
I mean, I think really reflecting on the sort of three different levels of consciousness, and just to observe interactions that go on and meetings that go on in the workplace. On what level of consciousness do they observe themselves and others operating out of? And my guess is that the third one, the we-ness, when people say something, is that in service of the greater good, or is that in service of me and my silo? Yeah. Just an observational thing it begins to form the grit in the oyster that people get there's an irritant. Then you begin to be able to put your finger on something which in your gut doesn't feel quite satisfying enough. So I think making the observations first,
and with that you become more aware of your surroundings, more aware of what people, what their intentions are, with any information that they actually provide. Indeed, does it benefit them and their silo, or does it benefit us and the team or the company?
That's right.
And if you can distinguish between those, then it can give you a little bit more insight into how that particular person is actually in that situation. And you can ask a question, right, based on that. If you are able to determine that, and once you're aware of it, it shouldn't be too difficult to do, I guess.
Well, see, I mean, you can certainly ask, inquire of other people when you sort of observe things. What I find the idea of people get armed a little bit of behavioral psychology, becoming the team psychologist, it's anathema to me. But they start focusing on themselves and what they might change in themselves. So like I mentioned earlier, the thought experiment. Make some observations of yourself and others as to what level of consciousness you think that you're operating from, or others are operating from.
And maybe
you want to make the change on yourself. So then
exactly.
Then try the experiment of next time you have meetings.
Yeah.
Just monitor what you're about to say.
Yeah.
Is this going to be at service of me and my department, or me and my area of expertise? Or is this going to be of service for the whole? Even though it may require a little bit of sacrifice for me and my department, by saying this, I know it's going to be for the benefit of the greater good. Trying with that little experiment, it could be interesting. Even if one person makes a difference and makes a different kind of comment or intervention in a meeting, out of a we consciousness, just to notice, what does that create in other people?
Yeah. Does it spark anything?
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. It should be an interesting experiment, indeed.
Yeah, and I'd be interested to hear if anybody gives it a go and what sort of things it created, what ripples it created.
Okay. Well, we'll leave it at that.
Mm-hmm.
I do believe this is a topic that we'll get back to in the future, because it is one of the bigger ones. As you say, it's like the biggest one that you do. Working together is something that is going to be fundamental to having a successful social business.
Yeah.
You cannot do it alone. You do need your colleagues. You do need your co-workers.
The clue's in the word social, isn't it?
Yes, it really is. Well, some people still don't get it. They're like, what's so social about? What's social business? Well,
that means you use Twitter.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's what we do. We have a Facebook page. There you go. Okay. No. Okay, so we're going to wrap this up. Thank you for all those insights, John. I'll have the corresponding articles that you wrote on your website in the show notes. They're going to be up on the website. And so I'd like to thank everybody for listening to this episode.
Thank you for listening.
And remember to subscribe to iTunes or on Stitcher and not miss a thing. If you have any comments or if you want to connect, feel free to do so. Until next time. Goodbye.
Goodbye.